Today we're doing a thorough examination of Pfizer's second quarter results. This is your market checkup. Now, Max, I was taking a good look at Pfizer's second quarter results, and what stood out to me is that primary care and established products, they both had substantial declines, double-digit declines, 17% for one, 11% for the other. But oncology, huge bright spot, was up 24%. How excited should investors be?
Well, they should be excited that there's growth there. The entire division brought in about $400 million, but at the same time, $400 million sounds like a lot of money to you and me because it is a lot of money. But to a company like Pfizer that brought in $13 billion in the second quarter, it's really just a drop in the bucket. It only contributed about 3% to sales.
Yeah, and when you take a look at some of the drugs, I mean, it looks amazing. It's funny, on a percentage term, you're like, oh, that's amazing. But, Inlyta was up over 300% to about $70 million. Right. So, I think that helps put it in perspective a bit. The question is, though, how important is oncology to Pfizer? Can it grow a lot in the future? And we saw that they broke it off into a separate unit with vaccines. Prevnar is likely going to become Pfizer's best-selling drug in a few years. So to have oncology there as well, it shows sort of, I think, the commitment to growth Pfizer has with that division.
Right, and you also looked at some immunotherapy drugs in their pipeline, right?
And they're a little behind there, behind Merck and Bristol Myers. They were talking, we'll be there with the second wave of immuno-oncology assets. They also have dacomitinib, which is in 2 phase 3 trials for non-small cell lung cancer. Those should finish up this year. We won't likely get results until 2014. And then they also have palbociclib in breast cancer. That's in mid-stage trials. Those won't play out until next year, so investors are going to have to be patient there. But it did receive a breakthrough designation, which is kind of a big deal.
Yeah, a breakthrough designation is a new status given by the FDA, and it started about a year ago. Today, more than 20 drugs have it. Still kind of a black box on exactly what benefit this gives to drugs, but basically it's meant to expedite the path to approval.
And it's always great having, the regulators on your side. I think this is part of the new, nicer, friendlier FDA. And we've seen, what a big difference it can make to smaller drug companies that, their main product is getting ushered through with breakthrough status. I think Pharmacyclics is a great example of that.
Yeah, Pharmacyclics recently filed for FDA approval last month for its drug ibrutinib, which received the breakthrough designation. It's being co-developed with Johnson & Johnson. And looking at Pharmacyclics as a stock, it's about doubled in the last year, so I missed the boat on that run-up. I think there's still,
me both, buddy.
Yeah, there's still some upside potential there, but I think it's limited. Its market cap is now hovering over $8 billion. So
yeah, which is huge. Now, ibrutinib is a potential game-changing blood cancer drug, so I think some of the enthusiasm there is warranted, and certainly Johnson & Johnson was excited. They gave Pharmacyclics $1 billion in milestone payments, which is essentially unheard of in this industry, and I think a lot of investors were like, well, if Johnson & Johnson is on board like that, I should be on board as well. I think if you're investing in Pharmacyclics at this point, though, you shouldn't be thinking, okay, Johnson & Johnson may buy them up. I think, a lot of the sales are priced in at this point. So if you're investing, you need to be thinking, can ibrutinib be expanded into additional indications as well? So moving on from breakthrough therapies to actual earnings, let's take a closer look at Pfizer's top and bottom lines. You looked at year-over-year performance. Revenue was down 7%. Net income was down 10%. What did you see there? Some headwinds.
Well, actually, if you look just at operations and not at currency exchange, revenue was down only 4%. And a lot of that has to do with the patent expiration for Lipitor. So Lipitor lost patent expiration in the U.S. in 2011, but in Q2 2012, it lost its exclusivity in Europe. And that's why we saw declines.
Yeah, it was another 55% decline. Still Pfizer's 5th best-selling drug. It really just goes to show when the world's best-selling drug loses patent protection, how far it can still fall, but still be incredibly relevant to the company. We talk about, Lipitor still bringing in $1 billion or so in sales, even though, or $2 billion roughly at this point. Take a look at something else that I noticed that was a nice little $1 billion kicker was a lawsuit settlement with generic drug company Teva Pharmaceuticals. Now, Teva did something that's known as an at-risk launch, which is when you launch generic competition, even though you do not have a legal right to yet, you're doing it assuming that you're going to win your court case. Unfortunately for Teva, that did not work out so well. And when that happens, you're also responsible to pay back damages plus some penalties. It ended up being a $2.15 billion verdict against them. Pfizer gets a little under $1.4 billion from that.
They had to split it with Takeda.
With Takeda, a Japanese drug maker. But all in all, not a bad day's work for Pfizer's legal department. And if they could keep that up, suing Teva, that could be a big blockbuster product for them.
No, that's a funny joke, but of course, Pfizer is doing a lot of impressive work in their pipeline.
Yep.
I think they're past a lot of the patent headwinds that we've seen in other companies, and I think they're poised for a lot of growth, and the restructuring there should also help.
Yeah, and I think when you compare their quarter to some other pharmaceutical companies, Sanofi is an example. I mean, they had just really a bad quarter. I mean, revenue declined, net income declined 15%.
Revenue was down 6% at constant currency.
6% for revenue. Animal health was problematic. Pfizer, of course, spun their division out. We've seen some mixed results with animal health. Lilly did a good job. Merck, not as much. But what actually really caught my attention with Sanofi was Brazil and how problematic that was. Emerging markets should have grown, but Brazil actually dragged emerging markets into declines. I don't know how you lose growth in an emerging market. I mean, that's really impressive on their part. Not in a great way. I mean, they still have Lantus, right, which is over a $6 billion drug.
Right. And actually, sales grew 17% year over year, so that was an impressive result.
And that's really, their flagship product far and away. After that, their next three best-selling drugs all declined, though. So the question is, Lantus's patent expiration is up in 2015. They're working on a next-generation Lantus called U300. Eli Lilly is working on a biologic, biosimilar version of Lantus. So it'll be interesting to see sort of what happens if they can migrate people to the better one, or if the cheaper one, if approved, can gain traction.
But also, David, don't discount Sanofi's pipeline. They have a number of partnerships with some up-and-coming biotech companies like Regeneron and Isis. So I'd like to take a closer look at Sanofi before,
No, I don't think it's all doom and gloom for Sanofi.
Exactly.
But when we're talking about patent expirations, let's move back to Pfizer's drug portfolio. Are they through the patent cliff? What inning would you necessarily say they're in for baseball? I know you're not a big baseball fan.
Actually, I don't know anything about baseball, so I can't really make an analogy there. But I did take a look at some of their upcoming patent expirations. They have Celebrex, which is losing patent protection in 2014. That's a blockbuster drug for them. Zyvox, 2015. And their best-selling drug right now is the pain medication Lyrica, but that loses exclusivity in 2018. So they still have a lot of runway ahead and a lot of cash being generated by this drug.
Yep, and I think when you look ahead to 2018, that's just part of life when you invest in a pharmaceutical company. Drugs eventually come off patent. You're going to get 5 long years. It did $1.1 billion in second quarter sales. It is their best-selling drug. Losing that will hurt, not to the degree that losing Lipitor hurts. So I think Pfizer took the biggest gut punch of the patent cliff, but Celebrex is its number 4 best-selling drug. Zyvox is its number 7. So these are significant products. But the question is, can their patent or can their pipeline help supplant this? I think they do have some products that should, over time, especially by 2018, help cushion the blow. And they're not the only pharmaceutical company dealing with this. I think they're getting towards the end of the patent cliff. It looks like Bristol Myers is maybe further along in that process, but Eli Lilly is a company that's towards the beginning of the process.
Well, Eli Lilly has some major headwinds up ahead. Cymbalta's patent is up in 2013. That was a major driver for the last quarter. The last quarter was great. Cymbalta sales were up 22%, but it's a small molecule, so generic competition will be present soon.
Yep.
Humalog, it still is its 3rd best-selling drug, but it lost its patent protection in May. That's a biologic drug, so I don't expect a biosimilar or a generic version of it to reach the market anytime soon. Currently, there aren't any approved in the U.S.
Yep.
So I think sales for Humalog are safe for now. Investors should really pay attention to Cymbalta.
Yeah, Cymbalta is going to hurt, but when you combine the two, the headline is, Eli Lilly is about to lose 1/3 of their revenue. But when reality is, it actually may not be that bad. And they do have some diabetes drugs in their pipeline. They have a cancer drug, ramucirumab, that should hopefully be able to pick up some of that slack, although there will be, I won't even say may, there will be pain when Cymbalta loses patent protection. In Pfizer's case, I think one of the drugs that we're looking at that could pick up some of that slack is Xeljanz for rheumatoid arthritis.
Yeah, Xeljanz was approved in the US, and it's the first drug for rheumatoid arthritis in a new class called JAK inhibitors. So there are some aggressive forecasts for peak sales. Many people think this is going to become a mega blockbuster drug. But just because it is in a new class of drugs, I think doctors are going to be slow in prescribing it. They're going to test it out first and see how it works. And there are also a lot of other alternatives on the market, like AbbVie's Humira.
Exactly, and Humira is the world's best-selling drug. It did, what, $9.3 billion in 2012 sales? And to show the size of the market, Johnson & Johnson has Remicade. It did $6.1 billion in sales. So they combined for $15 billion. These drugs are competing, and yet they're still mega blockbusters, by any stretch of the imagination. What Pfizer's drug has over them, though, is that it's taken orally. So that's extremely patient-friendly. Humira is injected, Remicade is infused. So that's a lot more difficult. The concerns with Pfizer's drug, besides it being a new class and doctors not necessarily comfortable with it, it does have some safety issues. And we saw this with the EU rejection. Well, it did surprise me that the EU questioned its efficacy as well, because I feel like the efficacy data is pretty good, but the risk of infection, Xeljanz lowers your body's immune system, and that potentially increases the risk of infection. And the concern for infections were raised in the EU rejection. But I think when you take a look at it, you're right. There was a lot of hype behind this drug. I think people saw the size of the market, they saw the dosing advantage, and they just said, okay, Lipitor 2.0, here it is. This is Pfizer's tentpole product.
It could very well be its next big blockbuster, but let's keep in mind it was recently approved, and we still have to see where sales go from here.
Well, and to that end, they are trying to expand it into other indications. They have phase 3 trials playing out this year for psoriasis, which is a market that a lot of people think is bigger than initially appeared, and there's a lot of excitement. We've seen other drug companies going for these psoriasis indication. It also is in trials for inflammatory bowel disease as well. So the more you can expand it, the better it is. And I think it's certainly going to be a blockbuster product. I have no doubt in that. But I think, it'll hit that, $1-2 billion range maybe, in the next 5 or so years. I think that's fairly safe to say. But this isn't going to be, the top of their portfolio. I think Prevnar is a much more compelling product for Pfizer. But it is an interesting debate. And thank you for watching our debate today on Pfizer's second quarter earnings. Stay tuned to Fool.com for Max Macaluso. I'm David Williamson. Fool on.